Okay, I've got a threshold here today. This is just an old, I call it built in place threshold that it's, losing some of the wood here. It's kind of cracked out and the homeowner wants me to replace it. So I'm gonna take it out first and go from there. So with these, I'm just gonna use a chisel and a hammer. And I like to just start by just breaking it down piece by piece. Okay, so I got the old threshold out, and you see we've got some nails sticking out here. I'm gonna either cut those off or pull them out. I'm not sure what I'll do. I'll figure that out in a minute. But the thing is to not try to take the whole thing out at one time. You can see I just broke it down into smaller parts. When you break it down into smaller parts, there's less chance of doing damage to the jamb. You want to keep your jam intact if you can, and the safest way to do it is just take those chunks out just methodically, one at a time, prying them away. It's also easier when you do that because you can get around these nails and slowly pry it away. If you try to take the whole thing out at one time, you end up pulling out the entire jam, and that just makes a huge mess that you have to spend a lot more time trying to figure out how to repair. For getting these nails out, I'm going to use what I call the wiggle method. What you do is you just take your wrench and you go as close as you can. Sorry, this is a pliers, sorry, wrench. Take your pliers all the way back to where the nail comes out of the wood, and you're just gonna methodically go back and forth. And then it just breaks off. And if there's anything sticking up, we just hit it back a little bit with a hammer. So I'm gonna just go and take all these out now. So I just did that wiggle method, and you can see they're all out, and now that wood is completely flat. And so we're getting ready to cut and insert our new piece. I think for the new piece, I'm just gonna clean all this out and then just use adhesive, and then maybe some trim screws to diagonally go in and attach back up to this. So I'll slide my new board in. I'm just gonna glue it down to the cement here, and then with adhesive, construction adhesive, and then I'll diagonally screw some trim head screws into this wood there to hold that in place. All right, so I'm about to start and trying to figure out what to do for this threshold. All thresholds should have a slope away from the house, right? So you always want, you want the water to, if the water does hit the door, you want it to drain forward. You do not want it to drain backwards. So you want to have a slope. This sill was installed. It was sloped. If I take measurements here, we've got about an inch and 5/8 in the back, and then just about 1.5 inches in the front. So I'm using cedar, and the cedar is 1.5 inches. So in order to give us the slope, I need to add some shims that are 1/8 of an inch. So what I'm gonna do is install these shims into the jam. I got 4 of them, I could get away with 3, but I'm gonna do 4. And then that'll give us that slope versus me having to cut the wood. I can't cut the wood because I only have 1.5 inches, so I need to go actually more. So the only way to get it up that high is to add a shim, unless I custom cut the wood, which is, again, that's more expensive than doing it this way. So I'm going to cut these. I'm going to glue these down. And then on the back, because the wood is going in on an angle, there would be a gap at the top because the wood is, you know, sitting like that. So I have to take the back piece of the wood and kind of back cut it, create an edge backwards so that that edge could then just be flush up against that. If I don't do it, that wood would be tipping forward and then there would be a gap there. So I'm gonna back cut that edge. So I made a mark at the 1/8 inch on the shim here, and I'm just gonna take my blade and just, it doesn't have to be perfect, but I'm just going to just score into these pieces, and then I just snap them off. These are composite shims. They're plastic shims. They will never rot. That's why I like using them. And they're much more precise compared to the wood as well. So if you're looking for something that's precision, go with a composite shim. Okay, well, I made my cut on the wood, and you can see here, this is the cut that I made, the back cut I was telling you about. So this is the front, this is the back where it's gonna hit the thing. And you can see that's a 15-degree cut. So when I go in to lean it up against the concrete, that will actually flatten out. It's gonna flatten out with that, because that's about a 15-degree angle right about this. When I hold that straight, it's about 15. So we'll see. I can play around with it. I can make it steeper or not steeper. So I didn't bring a table saw with me. I hate bringing a table saw. That's the best way to do it, to make a really nice straight line. I use my skill saw here, and I just set this angle here at 15 degrees, and then just, you know, set it in place, and then you just run it along and it cuts a thing. You got to be pretty skilled to just do it by hand like this. This is I mean, I got 20 years of experience, so I'm pretty confident with that. But if you're not confident with that, table saw is the best way to do it and get it like a perfect cut. So I'm gonna dry fit. I always dry fit my stuff to make sure it's the way I want it to be. So I'm gonna dry fit this in there, see what it looks like, see if I need to take more of a back edge, put more of a back edge on it. And then I can start gluing and maybe tapering this front a little bit more. See, I don't know, have fun with it. Okay, well, I got it kind of dry fit in. I'm not all the way to the back, but I'm just looking at it and it looks great. That's lining up really, really nice. So I think I've got the angle right, and I think that this is gonna be good. I can always sand this down once I get it in place and glued up. So I'm not concerned about that. And I don't want this to be a trip hazard. So I definitely need to make sure that this is at level or just a titch below that concrete level. So I'm gonna pull this back out, get my glue set, and then this is in here really quite well, quite tight. So that's gonna make it really nice to stick and hold. If you go too loose, if you make this too loose, then you know, if one person steps on it, you know, they're getting out of the garage and they step on this thing and it's not dry yet, then, you know, then stuff starts moving and you don't want that. All right, I'm gonna get this out of here. Another thing I like to do is install a drip edge, a rain drip edge. Again, this house here has got a 3-foot overhang. So water will probably never ever hit this. If rain is not gonna hit this thing. But for the viewers, this is what I'm gonna show you. So basically, you can see there's a little gap here. I just ran the skill saw down 1/4 inch all the way down it. The cool thing about this, and when I was growing up, when I bought my first house in Seattle, the guy who lived next to me was a cabinet maker, and so he, you know, I was working on my house, and he would come over and start talking to me. He's like, "Hey, what are you doing today?" Da, 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 da. And I was like, "Oh, I'm replacing these window trims." He's like, "Make sure you put a drip cap, a drip edge on that." I'm like, "Well, what is that?" And he's like, "Well, exactly what this is." So the rain hits the top, it rolls forward, it rolls down, and if you don't have that drip ledge, the water can also roll underneath and then roll back towards the house. So when you put in a little drip edge here, the water gets to this cut line and then falls down. It's pretty ingenious. I'm like, oh wow, that makes so much sense. You know, what a great idea. So anyway, anytime I make these, I like to put a drip edge on. So same thing for if you're doing an exterior window trim. A nice, thoughtful thing to do, and it's crass to me. Thing to do is put on a nice drip edge. Okay, so I just use for the shims, I'm just using this Loctite heavy duty adhesive, and for the front here, I'm just using some Dynaflex Ultra. This is clear, so it goes on white and dries clear, which is kind of cool. So again, I'm doing some stuff a little bit over the top today. Some people don't do this. Again, I take things to like a 10 or an 11. So I'm gonna hit this board in. A lot of this stuff's gonna go backwards. I know that. I'd rather just there be a little bit of buffer here. I've got my rain guard on, so I'm not really concerned about it. But again, it's just like you should do the same thing for every job, regardless of, even if you do have a roof overhanging, still do like everything the same, because you never know, they could change the roof line. So I'm going to slide the board in, and I'm going to use this clear. I'm going to put a little bit of clear along the back as I push it in, and that'll give me a nice seal between the concrete and the new piece of wood. So let's get this wood going. Okay, I've got the wood in, and now I'm just going to shoot my caulking along that back edge and then bang it in more to get that all sealed up really good. All right, so I got the piece in, I got the caulking in. I'm just gonna sand. There's a little bit of just a slight ridge here, so I'm just gonna just sand that down. Again, I'd rather be high than too low, because you can't add material back, but you can certainly take it away with just a sander here. I'm just using 80 grit sandpaper. I'll put a little edge on the front, just pretty it up a little bit. Yeah, it's coming along. Okay, well, I sanded it down, and now it's perfectly flat and level with the concrete that was poured. When they pour concrete, it's typically not perfect, so you're going to have some ups and downs. But again, when you bring the threshold in just a titch higher, you can sand it down and get it just perfectly level with the flooring that you're dealing with. So that's cool. I went around and saw me caulk all those seams. Again, it goes on white, dries clear. I like it. It allows you to see if you missed anything. And it was kind of cool because I put the caulking in first, and then I sanded it, and it kind of those some of the sawdust, and colored the caulking, which is kind of cool too. All right, so now what am I gonna do? I want to set some trim head screws into the wood. I'm gonna get some 3-inch trim head screws. I'll probably put in 4, one up top, and then 2 diagonally pinning going backwards. All right, so that's it. I got my screws in. I just put some caulk over the top of them. This is gonna get primed and painted by the painter. Yeah, I think this looks really good. I'm pretty proud of it. Another job done.